Welcome everyone to the third Thursday meetup of the West Orlando WordPress meetup group. I'm Rob Watson, a co-organizer and host, and West Orlando WordPress is an official WordPress meetup group and is affiliated with the main WordPress Orlando and WordCamp US meetup groups and organizations. Tonight's presentation is SEO and strategy to move your website forward. You've got a WordPress site? That's great. Now you're probably wondering how to get more people to see and visit it with all the hard work you put into it. Thankfully, there are plugins and strategy you can use to boost your search engine ranking, and you'll be learning more about those during this presentation. Our presenter tonight is Jean Perpillant. He is the strategy architect at jpdesigntheory.com. Jean started design theory in late 2008. With his background in IT, he finds that web design is a wonderful way to unleash his creativity. He feels a great sense of fulfillment with a client project when it's done and when they're happy with the end product. Incorporating photography into his services has been a passion of his. Managing the team that he has is not only fun, but a blessing. During the talk, in the chat window, feel free to type questions you have, and I will queue them up for Jean to answer after he's done with his talk. After the talk, feel free to pose your questions in person as well. At this point, I'd like to invite everyone to mute their microphones for the presentation. And Jean, thank you for being our presenter this evening. The time is now yours.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Rob. Thanks, everybody. First, I just want to say thanks for inviting me to be here to present with you all. Some of you are old faces that I haven't seen in a little while, and some of you are new faces, so hi to everybody. I'm really looking forward to present this to you. It is something that I find myself talking about a lot with not just my colleagues, some that are here, as well as my clients that are, that ask these questions on a regular basis. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So like I said, what I wanted to talk about today is SEO data and strategy, right? So these are the things that we always are thinking about when it comes to the websites that we build within WordPress and looking for ways to, again, move them forward. Everything that I'm going to talk about here are practical steps or just really easy shovel-ready things that you can do. It's nothing necessarily that you have to have a lot of coding experience to get into. Really more so stuff that you can just immediately take to your website and start making adjustments to, should you see fit. All right. So who are we? Well, myself, as Rob was saying in the introduction, I am Jean, and my wife, Nicole. We are the co-owners of Design Theory. Started this as a way to really use our creative outlets. I should say, starting off several years ago, where I was doing computer repair, and once that kind of dried up, I got more questions for doing, web design, and so that ended up being a thing. I kind of self-taught, and then started doing the communities like this, where people would get together, a couple times a month, talk about WordPress, talk about different things they learned about it, things that worked for them, things that didn't work for them, and before I knew it, I ended up being, a presenter and an organizer, like Carol, who's on the call right now, where we're able to give back. And so this has always been a great outlet for me. And so I look forward to being here. And so with that being said, that's a little bit of my history. What I want to do first is really get into hosting. And when it comes to your WordPress website, hosting really does matter. And I know that there's a lot of hosting providers that are out there, and I'm not really going to get into talking about like one over the other necessarily. If you ask me questions afterwards, we can talk about that. But essentially, the way that I think about hosting and the way that we've got accounts with almost all of them that are out there through some point in time, is that you kind of get what you pay for, right? And so if you're looking to kind of get started with a WordPress website, or maybe you don't really have a lot of content on it, and you kind of look at maybe you're starting it with your business or whatnot, and you're shoe-strapped with it, and you're thinking, oh well, I really don't have a lot to spend. I don't know what I should spend. You can probably go for any of the bargain hosting providers that are out there, where you can pay a couple of dollars per month for hosting. But again, you get what you pay for. And so if you're starting to grow your business and you're looking to gain more traffic, you're adding more content, you're looking for speed, you're looking for a lot of these features that are really make your website stand apart from your competition, that's where you're going to start to look at, different elevated options within the hosting providers that are out there. I want to talk about some of the key things that are in some of them. Most, if not all of them, offer something called shared hosting. So shared hosting essentially is a server that they set up. It's like or within a cluster of servers where you have a whole bunch of websites that they amount of space that they allow or they've allotted space for on that server for however many instances of websites, or depending on the amount of space that they've set up these hard drives for and resources for. And so within that, it could be you and maybe 100 others, 1,000 others, who knows, right? It all depends on how that hosting provider is kind of set up their shared hosting. This is usually the more inexpensive route to start off with, because again, you're kind of pooling your resources and pooling your site along with somebody else's. Now, if you are worried about security, maybe you're dealing with your type of website that you have deals with sensitive information. There's things that we're going to talk about a little bit later in terms of encryption and things like that. But this is kind of like you're on the same or in the same building with somebody else. So if somebody else's website, they're not really taking care of it too much, and they start to maybe don't do some updates, maybe they allow in, or their site may get hacked by a hacker. That hacker could then tunnel them to their site, to then the root of the server, and then possibly permeate to other sites depending on what their vulnerabilities are. And so while it's a lot better now than it was several years ago when it came to shared hosting, it is still, you're still kind of within those vulnerabilities, if you will, right? So the next above that would be a VPS, which is a virtual private server. This is essentially where they've allocated enough, a certain amount of space just for you and your instance of your site. So you're isolated from everybody else. And also you're, how do I say, you're responsible for your site and your files, where you're managing maybe in any instances, maybe if you're doing special connections from SSH to your site to do certain types of commands, all of that stuff you have available to you. But then depending on some hosting providers, your backups are done on your own. So whereas maybe in some other plans, they may do that for you. Maybe it's once a day, once a month, whatever that it is. Some of these cases with VPS services, all of these things you're on your own. So then if you run out of resources, you lock up your resources. Maybe you have some background things that are working on your website. You will need to know how to go into your, whether it's your cPanel or into your VPS, to then release those or clear those things out. So it's a little more advanced, if you will, in some cases, depending on the host that you get to. But the advantage of that is that you have your own space. And so you're not sharing any resources with anybody else, sharing hard drive space and memory. Now, memory is the last piece that's really important that I wanted to talk about. And so if you look at it in terms of shared hosting, there's a certain amount of memory that they allow per instance and per, let's say, cluster, right? And so if one site starts to, for whatever reason, gets a whole bunch of traffic and maybe starts to generate a whole bunch of traffic, that starts to pull away from the other sites that are there in terms of their available resources, because this site's not pulling a lot. Now, most hosting providers will have like a certain kind of cap or some kind of monitoring system to say, hey, well, this site's taking up a lot of memory. We need to limit this down or throttle this down so that way it doesn't, affect negatively all the other sites that are on this cluster, right? The good thing about a VPS as well is that you have your own amount of memory that you would need. So let's say that your site needs to run and you want it to run snappy or something like that. It needs to run, 256 or 512 or even a gig of memory or maybe more. You can allocate that. You're going to pay for it, but you can allocate that based on your VPS setup. But these are all really, really important things if you're thinking about hosting or thinking about, either changing hosting, setting up hosting or whatnot, or thinking about how to speed up the performance of your website. All of these things are very, very important. Okay. All right. So the meat of the potatoes of this presentation really is enlarged by the content strategy. This is something that I spend a lot of time talking about throughout my own platforms, and it's something that is still very much important in this day and age with digital marketing, right? Or with creating digital assets through your website. Creating content, is still a major element when it comes to Google. Google's always looking to see what's new, what type of content you're using, whether it's video, whether it's images, especially if it's text content, even podcasts, right? Google's even looking at that stuff. And so there's all of these ways that you can kind of create content and you can post or publish through your website. And so I'm going to kind of talk about some of the highlights of how to use these and what these things are that'll really help, again, get your site moving forward. So before we get into that, though, I want to talk about your theme. This is really, really important because I'll tell you a little bit of a story for me. When I first got started with building WordPress websites, we would find whatever themes that were out there that were free. And there was a lot of developers who were creating free themes, and they would say, hey, this is free. And they would show you like how it works or whatever. And then you just download the theme and then you kind of rebuild it to fit whatever that you want. And over time, I started to realize that this wasn't really the best thing, because by having some, whoever creative that they are, having some developer, let's say it's a one-off person, let's say it was me that created something. Well, it's me that created it, then that means that I have to update it. And with all the different updates that happen with WordPress, I need to make sure that I'm keeping my theme files up to date and my function files up to date, so that way it continues to work. Then there's plugins that are out there. I want to make sure that my theme is, works with some of the major ones, so that way, people will still want to either buy it or use it. And so all of those things kind of take effect. And so if it's just me doing that, chances are I may run tired. I get to all these tickets and whatnot, and I don't want to do it anymore, and I stop supporting it. Well, that happened to a lot of the client sites that I was working on a couple of years ago. And so we had to work ourselves into a framework, or to let's say a theme from a developer house or an agency where that's all they do. They make sure that they maintain that theme. Maybe they send updates to it on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. They have releases that they do for added functionality, making sure that vulnerabilities are patched up and all of these types of things, and making sure that they're in step with WordPress. And so with that being said, a lot of, some of these more premium theme houses that are out there, like Beaver Builder, like Divi, like Genesis, the Genesis framework, and some of the others, they create some really, really good themes that are SEO friendly out of the box. So which means that they make it easy for crawlers like Google and Bing and some of those to access the site to see what content is on there, so they can index it. They have areas on your website or on your pages for you to enter in some metadata. Maybe it's page descriptions or the description for the main theme of the of your site, and then maybe it's some metadata in terms of the page titles. Maybe you could do custom titles for each page, custom titles for each post if you do a lot of blog posts. And so all of these are just different ways that they make it so that way when it is crawled, this metadata is easily pulled and then easily indexed, so that way your site ranks a little bit better when people are searching for familiar key terms or things that your site actually creates content for or publishes content for. It's also going to be something that is going to render well on desktop, mobile, and tablet. As of, I think it was a couple of years ago, I think it was like 84% of web traffic. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was up there in the 80s, in the 80 percentile, where 80% of web traffic was on mobile devices, and so that's something, right? With that means that your potential visitors and clients and customers, they're picking up their phone to get to your website before they're sitting at their desk or maybe at their home computer to look up and see if they're willing to purchase something or view something or download something or, consume content from your website. So you want to make sure that it looks good and all your content looks good for that experience. It renders well, it pulls up, well, if they need to resize something or zoom in and see something, or if they they shouldn't need to zoom in to see something, everything is legible from that device. And then lastly, they have different types of layouts that are available, and they're also SEO friendly too, because maybe they have custom post types that are already set in there, maybe for like case studies or for like, how do you say, portfolios, or for who knows, right? And it depends. But a lot of these theme houses, create these themes that make it possible for you to have these certain types of setups for your content that are already keyed in that way. So that way, as again, when the crawlers are coming out there to look at your site, they understand, oh, this is a portfolio. So then I understand why these images are set up in a certain way. And then I'm going to go through these images and see and make sure that there's alternate, alt text that's added in there. Look at the title for the image and make sure that render that matches with the alt text and also matches with the content on the page. And then I'll go ahead and index that because this is something that's relative to these, key terms. So all of those things are really, really important when it comes to even picking out your theme. So if you haven't thought about that before, and if you were like me at the very beginning, kind of just picked up a theme just for the sake of it because it, was free or it was inexpensive or something like that, you may want to look to see about an upgrade and say, well, what can I look at that's really going to satisfy not just my needs, but more so my customers and my visitors' needs when it comes to their experience viewing the website. So a couple things we really want to get into here. When it comes to the content on your website, a lot of times, and I'll speak for me especially, when I first started creating content, I was just creating content, whether it was just for pages or whether it was blog posts, and I really wasn't giving much thought into internal linking. Now, internal linking essentially is, let's say you create 10 blog posts, and maybe you're talking about home improvement. Well, within the talk of home improvement, let's say, you know, of the 10 blog posts, you're talking about home improvement in the way of like bathrooms, bedrooms, garages, outside, inside, and all this stuff, right? But maybe some of the times you're talking about certain tools that you use and you reference that in a previous post. Well, that could be an internal link where you say, oh, by the way, you know, if you need to use this tool or this pressure washer, this hammer, or whatever that it is, you know, I did a write-up about that in a previous post. Here's the link, and maybe you hyperlink it within there, so that way people, while they're reading this this blog post about maybe pressure washing their driveway, they can look at or hit the link to look at what you talked about before about pressure washing their patio or their roof or whatever, right? And so what you want to do in terms of a really good strategy is try to come up with really good strategic ways that you're going to use internal linking to bring people around your website to kind of keep them in. So maybe they got your blog post from a search criteria. Maybe you were asking about, somebody was, you know, searching about, you know, what's the best solution to use for pressure washing and getting grime off my driveway. And so they get to your blog post. They didn't get to your homepage, didn't get to anywhere else. They got to the blog post where you're talking about that. But now that they're there, maybe you can intrigue them by telling them about other things through that post, about other products that you use or other methods that you use from something else that's related. You can internally link to that, and so that way they can click on that when they're done reading what you got, you know, what you did, what you wrote there. All right. The next thing is this happened a couple of years ago where Google was penalizing websites for not having, and they've been doing it ever since, but they kind of warned about it. But if you don't have an SSL certificate for your website, you definitely want to have one. A lot of hosting providers now kind of offer them for free. If not, it's anywhere between, I've seen it anywhere between 20 to 50 bucks for the year. Not necessarily a lot, but in the way of making sure that there's end-to-end encryption, meaning that whoever's visiting your website, it is a safe way of transmitting information where other third parties or hackers, it's a lot harder for them to intercept that traffic and that data coming that they're consuming or even maybe transmitting. Let's say they're filling out a form and they're having to put in some information in there, or they're checking out, or they're buying something, they're purchasing something from your website, and they're purchasing right on your website and not going through an external payment system like PayPal. You want to make sure that that transaction is as safe as possible. So having an SSL certificate gives you that level of encryption, and there's different layers of that as well, depending on, you know, the type of website that you have. But Google is also penalizing you if you don't have an SSL certificate, and so you may have seen this lock feature that shows up, you know, in your browser, or maybe your browser turns a certain color to kind of showcase, let's say, from like maybe a red to a green or something like that. And in some cases, I've even seen it to where you pull up a website and you'll just get like this all stop page where Google's kind of warning you, said, hey, you know, you may not want to go forward. This website's not really secure. And then you have to hit like advanced and hit all this other stuff just to continue to go forward. And it's like asking you, like, are you sure? It really makes it hard for people to kind of get past that, you know, to then, you know, get to your website and get there. And then when you do get there, it kind of shows like this thing at the very top saying, you know, or in the browser bar saying not secure. And so you really don't want to have that. Now, you may not have information that maybe you're transmitting to and from your visitors. Maybe they're not filling out any forms, they're not making any transactions, but you definitely don't want them getting on your website and getting this feeling like, it's not really safe for me to be here. So you definitely want to have an SSL certificate set up. Make sure that your pages, your images are optimized. This kind of talked about it a little bit before, where you're making sure that you're using, you know, your alt text and filling those in there. A lot of times when you're uploading, and this kind of default within WordPress, and I know that they're making more enhancements, especially using Gutenberg blocks, to make sure that, you know, these areas are addressed when you're uploading and creating content. But make sure that your alt text is there. If you're using descriptions, make sure that they're also entered in as well. When it comes to your images, make sure that you're using images that are specifically sized for the areas. If you're using hero images, you know, make sure that you're uploading the right size that you need for the hero image, and maybe not something that's terribly large where it's not really used. And maybe, for example, maybe like a 5,000 pixel by 4,000 pixel, but really the only thing that's going to be shown is like maybe 3,000 by like, you know, by 2500 or something like that, right? So you don't need something that large to be sitting on your server when all that's going to be rendered is just this much, especially on, you know, mobile devices and things like that. Next is search engine indexing. Make sure that it's enabled. I'm not gonna say it happens a lot, but it's definitely sometimes where we're building websites, or maybe I come in from somebody else and they're saying, hey, I just need some help, and we're working on sites. And Chris is on here as well. He can kind of tell you, he may have seen this a couple times too, where if you go down in the settings of WordPress, there's an option for you to tick off or tick on to discourage search engines from crawling your website. And so you want to make sure that if your site is public or is published and it's ready for action, that you make sure that that's unchecked, so that way you're not discouraging search engines from crawling your website, you know, crawling your site to see what content is on there, so that way they can index it. Takes a couple seconds for you to do, but definitely something that you that you want to check out and not miss if you haven't you know, done that already. Okay, next. Setting up an FAQ page. This is something that was fairly new to me a couple months ago, and I've been seeing where schema. I think I was talking to Brian about this a little bit ago, but seeing how Google's looking at the schema setups for FAQs. Now, again, going back to the themes, some of your themes that are out there may already have this preset as a template, if you will, where you can just say, hey, I want to do an FAQ, and then it'll already populate at least some of the fields for you to kind of use, so you can, you know, populate this content. But the schema that's behind there to make sure that Google, if you will, understands that this is an FAQ is really, really helpful, because what we've been seeing is that Google's kind of like pulling that content out and showcasing it within the search results. Now, again, you can still click on a link or whatever to kind of get back to the full page or this full site if you wanted to see more. But being able to kind of interact with those FAQs right there within the search results, and again, especially for consumers that are kind of looking at things right on their mobile devices, to kind of get an answer in and out is really helpful. So if you haven't really used FAQs and you have customers or people that are asking you kind of repetitive questions, highly recommend setting up an FAQ page, even if it's just like 5 questions. If those are 5 questions that are really going to be beneficial, why not put it out there? And then you can start to maybe even add a form on the side of there, or maybe at the bottom, and say, hey, do you have other questions that you'd like to see up here? Submit your question, and we'll add it within, you know, or we'll review it and get it added to the page, right? And then maybe use that as crowdsourcing to see how you can populate more things on your FAQ page. And then who knows, people will probably start to share it, and then that'll also be something where people just, you know, gravitate to, you know, to see what else you put out there that really helps them. Now, blogging is a big thing. I just had a conversation with some people that are more in the SEO space than I am, and so my next point I'm going to talk about in a second. But blogging and really publishing content consistently is key. There used to be a time, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, where I used to create content with a team of people that was with us, where I think it was like each of us was creating something at least once a day for like 4 days a week. And so it was great. And so we got a lot of traffic because of it, right? Because we were continuing to create content. People were subscribing to our list and to our blog. And this is when we were just doing blogging. And it was great. And so what people became to, and it still happens now, if you think about like episodic content, whether it's like a TV show or even sports, when you give people the idea to say, hey, I'm going to create something new for you to consume on a regular basis. Maybe it's once a month, maybe it's once a week, maybe it's once a day at a certain time each time. People will really gravitate to that. And so I highly recommend, if you're not doing that, it's sweat equity, sure, but create content on a regular basis. Maybe start off with blogging, then maybe graduate into doing video, then maybe get into podcasting, or maybe get into doing video and then scraping the audio and then getting that into a blog post. That works too. It's repurposing that content. But do that on a regular basis. I highly recommend that. And you'll start to see your rankings start to move up as well. And you'll also start to see a lot more people visiting your website, especially if you hit on a topic that may be trending, or you hit on a topic that a lot of people maybe aren't talking about, or maybe it's controversial to what people are talking about because your take on it is a little different than what most are talking about. All right. Now, when I wrote this initially, I learned that, 2,000 words or more was kind of the threshold when it was creating blog posts. I recently was on a call with Taco from Yoast SEO and learned that that's actually not the case. And now, yes, Yoast SEO is a really popular, if not the most popular SEO plugin that's out there. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But he was like, no, him and somebody else was saying like, no, it's not the 2,000 word thing. Actually, 250 words or more is good, but the threshold is at least 250 words seems to be, and that it'll be worthwhile and Google will still like it and things like that. So that was great to me, because when I first heard 2,000 words, I was like, all right, well then that kind of kicks me down to where it's like, maybe instead of me doing something once a week or even once a day, to really think about, using my keywords, really think about the content that I want to put out there, make sure that it's worthwhile, not something that sounds generic or that is like regurgitated from somebody else, but like really putting a lot of effort into it. 2,000 words every so often, or once a week or even once a day, that's a lot. So to hear that 250 words seems to be a really good starting point, if not sweet spot, at the very least, I was like, okay, we can do that. So my point and tips to you guys: at least 250 words, do it consistently, and make sure that you're using your keyword strategy for that. And speaking of keyword strategy, same thing here. Make sure that you're using the metadata that's in there. A lot of times, you may not be paying attention to the keyword or to the keyword options that you have in your blog post. Put those in there, even if it's like 3 to 5. You don't have to necessarily litter it with a whole bunch, but put some of those search terms in there. Pay much attention to your title. If anything, use Google Trend and see what people are talking about. And if you want to write something that's within the trend, so kind of ride the wave, use some of those keywords that people are searching for in trends. Use that in some of your titles, and especially in your content, as well as within your keywords. And you'll really start to see a lot of improvement in terms of traffic to your site. Okay. Everything that we do here at Design Theory is really data driven, and every time that we have conversations and even consultations about doing rebrands or redesigns or even just new designs, we really want to think about, hey, what's this really going to look like? Or especially on the redesign side of things, is this really worthwhile for us to make these changes? As a creator, especially from the design side of things, we just like to do things just because we think it's cool. It could be the new design trend that's popular for this year, and we'll say, this is going to be great. I know when Parallax came out, it was like, Parallax everything. And, that quickly went down the drain. But then there was, before that, it was doing sliders, and everybody was doing sliders. We got to do sliders left and right. Okay. And then, what was the reason behind all of that? Was it because we're putting content that's up there that's clickable, that brings you to the content that you can continue reading? Is it because we're showcasing products and events? Or is it just we're just showcasing photos just because we just want to showcase photos and just have like this sliding, element at the top of our website, and really doesn't serve much purpose to our visitors, because it's not really speaking to them in the way that we think that it is, or the way that we thinking that it's impressing them. It's not. And so what we really want to do is look at the data behind a lot of our decisions. And so Google Analytics is free if you're already using it. I believe that I have a presentation that's out there that you guys can download for free, where I talk about how to set up Google Analytics, install the code, and things like that. It doesn't really take long. Again, if you're using a theme that has these things that are already built in there, it's literally just kind of going in there, getting your code, bringing it into your theme, pasting it in a certain area that they have for you, hitting save, and then it takes care of your whole website. So all the new pages you create, all the new posts you create, and all the other stuff, custom post types and things that you do, it'll already be in there. That code will be in there, so that way Google can, you can go back to your analytics and kind of see what's happening in terms of performance. Now, reason why I talk about performance is because it's really, really important to understand what's happening with the traffic coming on your website. So who's visiting? Where are they visiting from? How did they get there? What search terms did they use to get to a page? How long are they spending on that page? Do they go other places once they land on that page? We kind of gave the example about, before, about people getting to your website where they maybe saw a blog post, saw something, and then using internal linking, they navigate somewhere else. And then maybe they get there, see some other links, and navigate somewhere else. That's great. And Google obviously wants to see that, because that means is your session times are rising, because people are spending more time there, consuming more content, and then it's obviously that content is worthwhile. So then there's the other side of things where it's like I'm creating content left and right, but I'm not really gaining a lot of visitors for that content. People aren't searching for it, or they're not getting there. Well, why are they not getting there? What are the words that people are getting to my website with? And am I using those words in creating more content to bring more of those people? Right? Or maybe I'm using the wrong words and the wrong people are getting to my website based on the words that I'm using there. And that's not really the audience that I'm looking for. All of these you're going to be able to see within your analytics. And so I highly recommend, I know it may be confusing to some at the very, very beginning, but I highly recommend that you spend some time at least once a week diving in. Look at the main area of the overview page when you get into your analytics to kind of see what's trending, what's happening, what's your bounce rate look like, what's your page session time look like, what's your page views look like. Are there more new people than returning people? That could be a good thing if they're new and then they're maybe, they're converting and then they're purchasing and then they're done. Or we want maybe more returning people and less, maybe not as much new people. Because we want returning people to continue to come back to, consume newer content, or continue to come back to buy more, or continue to come back to download more, or whatever that it is. We want to look at those, all of that's in analytics to kind of tell us whether or not things are working and if they're not working. Okay. In terms of analytics and ways that you can kind of use this is through landing pages. When we think about our websites, usually we're thinking about just maybe like your 5 typical pages, right? Like your home page, your about page, maybe your products page, and then maybe a portfolio page, and then a contact page, and then maybe your blog, right? So that's maybe 6. Those are like your typical ones, and that's fine. But if you have, whether it's a service or a product, you really should be creating landing pages to kind of talk about those specific products solely. And now landing pages essentially are just, we call them kind of squeeze pages, but they're essentially just pages where it's just one thing that we are talking about on that page. So when we market that, maybe through our social links and things like that, maybe we're talking about a specific product that does one thing. Well, that's great. Well, we're going to market that. And so when maybe we create like a short video on our socials on LinkedIn or on Instagram or Facebook, where we're kind of promoting how this product works. So then when people click on a link, it doesn't bring them to the homepage. That's the old way of doing things. We want them to come to the landing page where they can see more information about that product or service. And then when they get there, maybe they get a different video that says, hey, glad you're here. And it's right at the top, maybe within, above the fold. Glad you're here. I know that you're a little interested in this product. It does this, that, and the third. And let me tell you more about it. And by the way, we're doing a sale and da-da-da. And then so they can consume that video. Maybe they see some more headings and some more supporting text to talk about, maybe some bullet points to talk about, how this product is better than the competition, maybe how it's new or whatever that it is. All of these things are on that page, and we're just talking about that product so that when people get there, they're getting more of what they were looking for, how they were curious from this other offering that they saw through another, through a social site or something else. And then now that they get there, and then as they scroll down, they have options that are kind of built in every so often, or maybe through pop-ups where it's like, hey, get ready to buy now, or you can click here to buy now, or maybe sign up to subscribe, or sign up to our mailing list, or subscribe to our mailing list, or subscribe to our whatever, or get early access for something, or get access to a discount code if you subscribe now or join our mailing list. Whatever that it is, whatever you want them to do, you have a singular function of their call of a call to action that you want this person to do to convert. And so if it is to sign up for something or subscribe to something or purchase something, that's just there. And sometimes it's repeated, but that information is just on that landing page. Okay, so I know that was a little long, but I wanted to make sure that I explained that. Because as you think about your website and in terms of your content, you really want to create several landing pages for all of your products and all of the services that you offer. Just so that way you can kind of leave people there. You can market specifically just those pages to kind of see how they're performing. Again, we could look at analytics to tell us how those pages are doing, and then even take it one step further by doing A and B testing to say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to create this page that talks about the product in this way, maybe towards a certain demographic. And then I'm going to talk about this product, same product, a different way towards a different demographic, maybe with different colors, maybe rearrange some content a little bit. And I'm going to look at my analytics to see which one's performing better, and is it performing better based on the audience that I'm really looking to attract. Now, let me give you some examples of some landing pages just so that we get a visual of what I'm talking about. This is from ZipRecruiter. When you get here, right above the fold, you're seeing a really large hero image. That's their background. And then you're seeing one function that we want you to really pay attention to, which is post your first job within minutes, right? And so this is probably more talking on the side of recruiters or companies looking to hire more so than people who are looking to find a job. And that's fine. But that's, you know, when I did my search, and I probably should have saved, you know, what I did to land here. But based on what I searched, chances are I clicked on it. Maybe it was an ad or a Google ad or something that brought me to this because they were assuming that I was somebody who was on the side of looking to hire someone. Totally fine, probably speaking to me, which chances are it is. And so that speaks right to me. I know when I land here, I know exactly what I need to be doing. I'm not confused with a whole bunch of content. I'm not seeing some frills or some animations and all this stuff that really doesn't appeal to me. I'm just seeing specifically what I need to do. And so right in there, I just click on it, what I'm looking for, hit the drop down, post, you know, and then take it from there, what I want to do, and then probably go through their process from there, right? Next is oh my gosh, I forgot their name. HubSpot. HubSpot creates landing pages for like almost every single piece of content that they create, which is great. They've been, you know, doing this for many years and been really successful at it. And so I wanted to kind of showcase a little bit of what they did here. When you get here, you're kind of seeing some options on the right here in terms of call to action to say, hey, subscribe to our email. But then you're also seeing some of their blog posts that they're talking about, you know, how to write a blog post and then, you know, how to promote your business and so on. And then you see some editor picks. So we have a lot of different options here, but then knowing what I, as the consumer, when I come to HubSpot in particular, I know that they're going to offer me a lot of different things, and it's fine. That works for me. And they've, again, by data, know, well, we're going to give the viewer, at least in their first impression or their first visit here or their first land here, to say, okay, we're going to give them a few different things to look at that are all somewhat related, and then let them navigate themselves from there based on how they got here. Maybe I searched, you know, blog post and promote, or blog post and Facebook or whatever, and it brought me to this page. So then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I do want to read about, you know, how to write a blog post, a step-by-step guide. But then I'm also curious about how to promote my business on Facebook. I didn't know that they talked about that. So I'm going to go ahead and read that, and I can see, and I like how they kind of set up and give me a timeline to say how long this read is. Well, maybe I'll jump into the Facebook one first because it's only 4 minutes, and then I'll jump into the marketing one because it's going to take me a little bit more time. And that's really what I was looking for. But now that I see this, I'm a little curious for that. So it's a really nice way to kind of set up for their viewers. This is what a landing page would look like in terms of design. Okay. So Yoast is another one, right? So when I get here, I have a few options, but essentially, you know, pretty big on here, it's asking me, you know, what am I looking for? And I can just type in what I'm looking for. If it's, you know, a couple different things, maybe I don't know, I can type that in, takes you right to a search, which is going to, based on the keywords I'm searching for, it's going to bring me to either a page or a post or something where I can consume more information about that. But as you get here, you can see they've got a list of their recent blog posts, and then they've got some pretty easy to read and pretty in your face buttons about, you know, get Yoast SEO, whether it's to get their plugin support or learn about SEO, which is you know, ideal. And then they still have the header menu at the top there, but if you look, it's kind of embedded in. I see it, but the first thing that my eye is brought to is those 3 boxes up there, right? And even probably more strategic is how they made the one box highlighted in yellow. They're not using that color anywhere else on the site, or at least in this part of the page. So there's a little bit of strategy to that too. That could be an A/B thing where they did one page where all of them were the same color purple, but then they did one that was a color yellow, just to see, hey, are we getting more engagement by doing that and making that stand out? And is that okay? Do we want people to go there more, right? Okay, so I kind of designed this one just to kind of show you as a framework, if you will, of what a landing page could look like, right? So you have maybe your intro video, you got like a background behind there, maybe your product, you have some affiliates, so you have some logos to kind of go there, maybe some companies that you work with or organizations that you work with, and so just for name recognition, you kind of showcase those underneath there for the consumer. Then maybe you have your headline, maybe there's a photo or there's some kind of logo there to kind of tie into the brand, or maybe it ties into maybe where they may have seen this. So maybe they have seen your posts on socials, and so you have that logo there. So just to kind of bring the similarity and that consistency, maybe you bring that same logo there. Then you have your title, some subtext, and maybe you have a call to action to say, hey, I want you to get started now, sign up, whatever. You got a form there. This is another example, a little different here, where we're using a background photo and then maybe an overlaying text or another image over that photo. And then we have maybe a testimonial or something where people are talking about the product. And then we have, just a simple email box, an opt-in feature there. Again, a title. You can kind of do it however that you want. There's some examples that are out there like I'm showing you, but then there's really no wrong way to do it. I would just say, again, look at your metrics, look at your data to see, are people converting, and is this worthwhile for your visitors to consume or interact with your content to the way that's best for them. Okay, I want to get into to redirects, because this is something that I kind of came into a little later in my career, but it was kind of funny in the way that that I came across it based on my old content that I had out there from when we were creating blog posts on a regular basis. 301 redirects essentially are for redirecting traffic from old content or even pages that may not be published anymore or not there anymore, maybe you deleted them, over to a more relevant page. So it's kind of like a soft redirect. So maybe if you had a blog post, or let's say you had a page where you sold some products and you no longer sell those products anymore. Well, you've promoted that page. That page is out there on a whole bunch of different places, maybe some other affiliate websites, maybe some partners and things like that. And so people still, try to use that link. Well, maybe you have better products, or maybe you've switched to different products. So instead of having people click on that link and then get to an error page on your website, you can redirect them to a page where there's some relevant or related content, or maybe, like I said, maybe different products or services, things like that. You can program them in there either through an HTTPS file that's on your server, a little more technical there, but for most hosts, and I'll show you this with a screenshot later, there's a way for you to create redirects within your control panel or within your hosting provider. So let me give you a quick story about why this is important, especially if you have a website that's been up there for a long time. If you got content that you may not have revisited to see if that content is still worthwhile, still up to date, or whatever. In my case, again, we had a team of us that were creating content on a regular basis. We were creating content. A lot of it was around design. And so a lot of that stuff, the design stuff, really took off. We still get a lot of traffic from it. However, that a lot of that content is old, and we don't really talk about design anymore. So we don't really have, it's not really satisfying for people to still get to our website to see old content talking about design when that content is a little older and it's not something that we refreshed or that we are talking about anymore. We're really not even in that space in the same way that we were at the time. And so I started to notice that our bounce rate on our website was really high. And a lot of it was because people were going to old content that's still there, but for me, it wasn't relevant anymore. And so I got into looking about, well, what do we do about this? And so the best way to kind of correct that was to create 301 redirects. So that way we could bring people over to content that was either related, or at least let them know, said, hey, thanks for visiting. This content that you were looking for, we no longer talk about it. And so it's outdated and old. However, we've got all this new content that's really in the space of digital marketing that we really think that you'd enjoy. So it brings them to that page. They can click on that. And then they also have the ability, we also created the ability for us to showcase our latest blog posts as well as some specific static content. So that way, the page is always evolving, if you will. It's not stagnant, if you will, by just saying, hey, we've changed, we've moved, sorry for you, or just click here for, returning to our web or to our homepage or our blog or whatever. So you can kind of create, your own, it's essentially a custom 404 page, if you will, where we've done this strategy. In your case, you can do something to where it's like, hey, instead of coming here, we want you to come here because this is more relevant based on the content that was there and versus what's up here now. Or if you're like me, none of this stuff is relevant anymore. We really want you to pay attention to what we have now. This is where you can really consume some really good stuff. All right, so a really easy way through most hosting providers for you to do some 301 redirects is to look through your control panel and look for, and this is through, our site is with WP Engine, within the control panel, we have the option of doing a rule. And so essentially we're creating a name or for the rule. And we can say, for example, old design aesthetics content or page. So that'll be the redirect name. And then the domain, obviously, we'll just choose ours that's there. And then the source we'll type in, and there's a certain strategy for creating that. It's like an up arrow / and then the page. So it assumes that it's your domain. So let's say yourwebsite.com. And then it's saying from there, we know that, but then from there, this is the page. So this is the URL. And then the destination, you put in the full URL of the destination that you want them to go to. So it'll be yourwebsite.com / new content here, right? And so then once you put that in there and save it, anytime somebody types in or brings up the old URL, it'll bring them right to the destination of where you want them to go, right? So it's super simple. You don't have to go into the htaccess file and put in the little rewrite to make that work for you. If you don't want to, you can do it through here, and then it'll serve the same. Okay, so really quick shout outs for plugins to really help you with your website. If you're not using Yoast, I highly recommend that you use it. Their free option for their plugin is really, really beneficial, especially if your theme doesn't have a lot of these features built into it. Again, check and balance. Look to see what they offers you. If they have some of the things that you need, like if your theme offers you a sitemap, if it offers the metadata for each page and post and things like that, and shows you snippets to show you, hey, when you publish this page, here's how it's going to look in search engines and things like that. Yoast does all of that and more. If it does that, great. If it doesn't, then download this for free. Plug in the information. It really doesn't take too long for you to set this up, but it is something that you want to, stay consistent with in terms of updating your content if you are creating content on a regular basis, as well as if you have a lot of content before you loaded this, go back and fix that stuff so that way, it all shows up correctly. It doesn't wipe out maybe what potentially was there before, where this may overwrite it by showing nothing if you don't enter in any information for those pages and posts. All right. Lastly here, this broken link checker. It's a free plugin from WordPress. Highly recommend using this as well. Reason being is that if you have a lot of content, or maybe you have some pages and you've done some changes in terms of hosts, maybe you move from one host to another, and maybe some things fell through the cracks, you definitely want to check out what links may be broken, because it could be damaging your SEO ranking by those pages no longer working. And especially if you have more than a handful, it'll really start to lose some points from Google from that. So again, this is free from WordPress. You can download that, and I believe it's updated on a regular basis too.